A good Erev Shabbos, everyone. A royal welcome, as you are invited to join me for the learning of Teres Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. And we always start off with tremendous Hakaras HaTov to TorahAnytime.com for this global platform of Torah on a weekly basis, and to Chazak for being Mefarsim this year. We'd like to thank an anonymous sponsor who came through the last minute to sponsor this week's share. We didn't have a sponsor. If you want a sponsor for next week, again, we do not have a sponsor for next week. I think it's slower a little bit in the summer, so it's a good time to sponsor. 718-916-3100, 718-916-3100, or RMMWSI, Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss, Staten Island, at AOL.com. Again, as I announced last week, if anybody is interested in making a dedication in my new shul in Fairways, Lakewood, which we're trying to get ready for Shabbos Slichos, but we need help with dedication, 718-916-3100. Also, we would like to wish a Mazel Tov to our children, Nehemiah and Rivki, on the birth of a baby boy, and Mazel Tov to the proud parents, Ari and Dini Adest, grandparents as well, and they should be Zeicha Lachnisei Lebrisa Shel Avram Avinu Bizmanai. The Parsha tells us of a remarkable woman, V'shem Bas Osher Serach, and the name of the daughter of Osher is Serach. So Ramban asks an obvious question. I mean, we have a whole litany of names, and Fuva Mishpacha Safuni, right? L'shvufa Mishpacha Sashufami. I mean, L'chanoich Mishpacha Sachanoichi. Nowhere does it say V'shem in the name. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of names. So how come by this woman it says V'shem Bas Osher Serach? The Ben Ish Chai offers two practical reasons. One is that sometimes she's referred to as Serach with a Samach. Actually, in the Torah, in Shemais, she's called Serach with a Samach. Now, at first glance, that's a strange name, Serach. Serach with a Samach means spoiled. Saruach means Lahasriach, means to spoil. And it's the same letters as Chosar. That doesn't sound like a very nice name, but the word Serach also means extra, like we have by the curtains in the Mishkan, the Serach HaOdeif, the overhang. And indeed, that is a good description of Serach Bas Osher, who lived about 1,000 years, so she sure got extra, and she, as the Targum Yonasan ben Azil says in this week's Parsha, she went alive to Gan Eden. We'll talk about that momentarily. So therefore says the Ben Ish Chai that to set the record straight, V'shem Bas Osher, the true name, is Serach with a sin. That's one pshat he says. The other pshat that he says is that everybody used to call her Bas Osher, like Rav Moshe's son, Rav Yaakov's son. So everybody used to call her Bas Osher. That's how they referred to her, Osher's daughter. So therefore, the Torah says, V'shem Bas Osher, her name was Serach. That's what the Ben Ish Chai says. The Ramban brings down the Targum, where it says, V'shem Bas Itas Osher Serach, which is a remarkable Targum. The Targum, which is quoted also in many other places, the Targum says that actually Serach wasn't Osher's daughter. She was his stepdaughter. And it was the daughter of Osher's wife from another marriage. V'shem Itas Osher. And the name, V'shem Bas Itas Osher, the name of Osher's wife's daughter was Sarah. Now, this, of course, causes a very strong question, and that is in Parsha Shmais, when the Shivan Nefashis are counted, she is one of the 16, and therefore the only way she would be considered a part of the 70 Nefashis from Yaakov is if it came from Yaakov's loins. But if this is Usher's stepdaughter, then why is she counted as the 70 Nefashis? The answer that they say is that since Usher raised her, so it says Kol HaMegadol, a child, B'seich Beisai Ki'ilu Yoldai, and therefore it's considered as if it's Usher's daughter and Yaakov's granddaughter because of the fact that Usher raised her. And indeed, we find talk in the Gemara that Abaye refers always to his stepmother as Omroli Aim. My mother told me. Now Abaye never knew his mother. When Abaye was conceived, his father died. When he was born, his mother died. He never knew his mother. And throughout Shas, he refers to his stepmother, who raised him, as Omroli Aim. My mother told me. So that's the answer that they say, and that's the Ramban's Mahalach. However, the Dazakanim Bali Taisvis and the Chizkuni say the same thing. And this is what I want to really analyze, because I hold it carries with it a tremendously important message. And that is, the Dazakanim Bali Taisvis says, and I quote, I'm going to read it verbatim, Ulefi shahoisa shma yedua b'chasidus ub'maisim toivim, because her name was known in piety and good deeds, ksiv aleha v'shem. In other words, it says v'shem bas Asher Serach, specifying shame because she made for herself a spectacularly good name. Now you have to understand that this is one of the great missions of life, to make for ourselves a good name, and once we have a good name, to guard it zealously, that it shouldn't be tarnished. The great Reb Shimon Bar Yochai tells us in Pirkei Avos, if you want to look it up, it's in the 4th parak of Pirkei Avos, Mishnah Yud Beis. It's a famous Mishnah. Shloisha Ksarim Hein. There are 3 crowns: Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, the Keser Malchus. And then it says, V'keser Shem Tov Oyla Al Gabeim. And the crown of a good name towers above them. Now, if I would have asked you a casual question, what could be more than the crown of Torah? You would tell me, Torah? Torah is supreme. After all, we learned Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. What could be greater than the crown of Torah? The supremacy and the centrality of Yiddishkeit is Torah. What could be greater than the crown of Torah? But the Mishnah tells us, V'keser Shem Tov Oyla Al Gabeim. The crown of a good name towers above them. Now, of course, there's an internal, really puzzling question about this Mishnah. Because if there's a separate crown of a good name, so why does the Mishnah say that there are 3 crowns? The Mishnah should say that there are 4 crowns. So actually, if you study Rashi on Pirkei Avos, Rashi learns this Mishnah in a rather unique way. Rashi says that all 3 crowns need to be accompanied by the crown of a good name. And that's what it means, V'keser Shem Tov Oyla Al Gabeim. And that is, the crown of a good name fits over the 3 crowns. Because in order to be a good king, you have to have a good name. In order to be a successful kohen, you have to have a good name. And in order to be successful at Torah, you have to have a good name. So really there are 3 crowns with, so to speak, an accessory or a topping known as the crown of a good name. That's a very interesting way that Rashi learns. And it's for the first time that I saw this Rashi on Avos. Rashi does this because he asks the question that I posed. And that is because if not, it should say 4 crowns and not 3 crowns. However, the Rambam on Pirkei Avos, and also the Rabbeinu Yaina, the Venerable Rabbeinu Yaina on Pirkei Avos, they learn that there's only 3 crowns. the crown of the good name is from a developed Keser Torah. And let me quote to you the words of Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina says, "Kayim Shem Tov, who would there exist a good name im lo asher yasik b'Torah v'yikayim mitzvaysav? If not a person that occupies themselves with Torah and fulfills the mitzvahs. That gives a person a good name." Now it's interesting, both Rashi and Rabbeinu Yoina cite the pasuk of Tov Shem Mishem Tov. Better is a name than good oil. Rashi has a little bit of a homiletic explanation of this verse. Rashi says, Tov Shem, better is the name Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah that acquired for themselves a good name by defying Nebuchadnezzar and going into the furnace of fire and being Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. Mishem Tov, from the ones that were anointed with Shemen HaMishcha, Nadav and Avihu, the children of Aaron, that were burned. So Tov Shem, better is Hananiah, Mishael, who acquired a good name and therefore were not burnt. Mishem Tov, from those that were anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha, the Tzadikim, Nadav and Avihu, that were burned. So that's a bit of a homiletic explanation. Rabbeinu Yoina says a more practical explanation. He says, Tov Shem Mishem Tov. Shemen Tov, he says, is a wonderful perfume, like balsam oil. Now, that perfume can only benefit people if they're near it. If you're in a room with somebody wearing balsam oil, if you're in a perfume shop with balsam oil, you benefit from it. But if, let's say, you're in the next block, or for sure in the next neighborhood, you don't benefit from the balsam oil. But if somebody procures for themselves a Shem Tov, a good name, that goes from one end of the world to the next. And that's the meaning, says the Rabbeinu Yoina, of Tov Shem Mishem Tov. Better is a good name than good oil. But let's, for a second now, develop this idea of a Keser Shem Tov, of a good name. A person gets a good name when he practices or she practices certain traits. Now, let's see who we're talking about, right? We're saying V'Shem Bas Asher Serach. So we said that she would go into Gan Eden alive. She dodged death. Rather remarkable thing. Zang Yonason Ben Azil says, why was this? Because she was the one that gave Yaakov Avinu the news that Oyd Yosef Chai, that Yosef is still alive. So Serach Bas Asher revived Yaakov Avinu. Now, if you want to go to the simple Midah Keneged Midah, it says Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Avim. He came alive, and it's brought down that the Shechina that he was bereft with for 22 years devolved upon him again once he was told that Yosef was alive. So Midah Keneged Midah, because Sarah caused the Shechina to devolve upon Yaakov, therefore she merited going straight to the Shechina, to Gan Eden, without having to die. That's a simple explanation. But for more practical for us is, the Kahati, Mishnayos Kahati, the remarkable Pirush of Kahati, what a schus Kahati had, how many people were zeicha to finish Shisha Sidrei Mishnah and know it because of the Pirush of Kahati on Mishnayos. In the Mishnayos Kahati, he brings down from the Meiri. The Meiri talks about Im ato chafetz be'avas odam. If you want that people should like you, people should love you, have a noisei v'noisein b'toivasai. Look out for the welfare of people. Now, Serach that we said, V'shem Bas Asher Serach, and the Chizkuni and the Dazikenim Alitayim said she acquired a name for herself. She was concerned. She was the one of everybody. Everybody could have told, but she wanted to be the one to tell Yaakov that Oyd Yosef Chai. You have to know that if you want to be zeicha to have a good name, it helps to say nice things to people. That's a Mishnah. Ben Zayma says, Ezel mechubed. Who in life is an honored person? Who do people honor? When it says honor, that means that people look up to the people, that they like the person. Who do people honor? Now, I would have answered, if you live the straight and narrow, you live right, so people will honor you. But it's not that way. We live in a cynical world. And people are cynical, and they say, yeah. Very, very good. That's the way he is outside of the house, but maybe in the home he's a terror. Well, that's the way she is, but I wonder how she is behind closed doors. That's what it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Al todin es chaveira, don't judge a person until you come and see the way they behave in their own place. Right? So people are cynical. But you know when people respect you? When you tell them nice things. When you tell somebody nice things, you know, it's really nice to see how you are with your children. I can learn from you. A person isn't cynical when you tell them that. They say, oh, this person notices. The person is a good judge of character. You tell somebody, I could learn from the way you are with your spouse. Or you say to someone, I see the way you daven. Wow. I hope one day I could match that. Or you say to someone, I saw you sitting and learning. You didn't budge from your chair the whole hour. That's amazing. You tell people things like that, they respect you. And that gets a person to be mu'uriv in labriyas, and it helps a person to have a good name, to have a shem tov. And what's really a lesson from the great Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is that this is like the greatest achievement in life. The keser shem tov oila al gabeim. The crown of a good name towers above everything. It really is a mission statement for a successful Ben Torah, for a Bas Yisrael, to acquire and preserve a Shem Tov. And that's what it says about Serach Bas Asher. V'Shem Bas Asher Serach, she succeeded, and what a role model. She lived around 1,000 years and went straight to Gan Eden. The Fuva Mishpachas Hapuni. Now this is a family of Yisachar, and of course, it begs the question, it really would have been more accurate to say Lefuva Mishpachas Hafuvi, and not add the nun, Lefuva Mishpachas Hapuni. So there's a very interesting Orach Chaim HaKadosh, which is a fundamental yesod. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh writes that Chasidei Yisrael, and if the Orach Chaim HaKadosh is quoting Chasidei Yisrael, he must be talking about real giants. When a giant quotes giants. So he says, Chasidei Yisrael write that the mouth of people that learn Torah has a din like a clay shoris, like a ministering vessel. A ministering vessel in the Beis HaMikdash that we catch the blood with, that we throw on the Mizbeach, that we put the kmitza of a mincha on to put on the Mizbeach. So the mouth of a Talmid Chacham has a din like a clay shoris. Really, it's a really, really strong statement. And this is demanding. Because he says, why? Because he says, Ki ein kedusha ki kedusha satayra. A carbon that makes a clay shoris is holy, but there's no holiness like the holiness of Torah. And therefore he says, it's forbidden for a Talmid Chacham to use his mouth in a cavalier way. Now, he says that's pshat. Yisachar is the shevet of Torah. Uvnei Yisachar yoidei bina leitim. And therefore he says, lefuva, that's peh with the Vav and the Hey, which is two letters of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, a mouth that speaks the Holy Torah, Ha'amal B'Torah, Mishpachas Hafuni. It has to be, Funi means to turn around, to turn away, such a Pete Sarach Lefanais, Mipiv Kol Chol, anything mundane, since it learns Torah. Now, we find this concept that a mouth has a din of a clay shares with a famous Rabbeinu Ephraim. Rabbeinu Ephraim says that the mitzvah of Milah is like bringing a carbon oila. And he says the mitzitza bepeh, the sucking of the blood with the mouth, is because the mouth is a clay shares and the blood goes into the clay shares. So again, it compares the mouth of a Talmid Chacham to a clay shares. And of course, we know the difficult sefer, which Talmidei Chachamim spend so much time on in yeshiva, the Shev Shmaitzer. The Shev Shmaitzer writes, we know that a Sefer Torah is the klaf of Torah Shebiksav. What about the oral law, the Gemara? What's the klaf of Torah Shebal Peh? He says that the klaf, the parchment of Torah Shebal Peh, is the mouth. And therefore the mouth needs ibud lishma, making it holy, like the klaf of a Sefer Torah. It's interesting because the Kruder Rebbe just told me this week that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that when Bilam said, Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkanaisecha Yisrael, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh writes an amazing thing. He says Hashem put a tube, a tzinor, a pipe in the mouth of Bilam so that the words should come out through the tube, because they couldn't come out of Bilam's tummy-dick mouth, where he cursed people and he said all kinds of things of promiscuity. So Hashem had to put a pipe, a tube, into Bilam's mouth that it shouldn't come out of the mouth of Bilam. It's also interesting that before we say Baruch Sha'amar in davening, we say Hareini Mizamen es Peh, or Pi, Lahaides Ulahalel Ulashabeach es Bairi. And then we say Baruch Shama. So what does it mean? I'm preparing my mouth. So the simple meaning is in the morning when we wash out our mouth so that it should be free from the ririn, from mucus over the night, in order to say Hashem's name clearly. But the Manchester Rosh Hashiva says it's more than that. Manchester Rosh Hashiva says in order for a mouth to be able to say Shirais v'Sishbachais to the Rabbeinu Shalom, it has to be a clean mouth. It can't be a treifa mouth. So I prepare my mouth by making sure not to scream in the home. I prepare my mouth by making sure not to chas v'shalom say nivel peh. I prepare my mouth by not speaking lashon hara, by not revealing secrets, and by not telling lies and not saying oinas devarim, hurtful words. Now I want to add what we were talking about before, about saying nice things about people. Saying nice things about people is something that we have to work on. It's an art form. You know, it says, Ezel chacham haloi made mikol adam. Who is wise? One who learns from every person. Now, who could learn from every person? Only a person that sees good in every person. So I heard from the Kurla Rebbe just this morning that the Lubliner Rav, before he said shir, wouldn't say shir until he looked at every person in the shir and thought of something that that person was more than him. More than him. So a Mechal Shabbos walked in the room. And he thought to himself, well, he was like stumped. And then he said, wait a second. If I would be a Mechal Shabbos, would I come to a shir? He's coming to a shir, although he's a Mechal Shabbos. Now, this talent of seeing good in people, this allows us to be able to say nice things to people and to be Me'urav and Mabrias. And this could be the simple meaning of the pasuk Mio Isha Chafetz Chaim, who wants life, Oyev Yamim, loves days, wants to live long like Serach Bas Asher, Lira Yistoiv. Train yourself to see the good in people. Now, we learn about an infamous person. I made a bracha already. We learn about an infamous person in this week's parsha. L'shemo ish hamuka. The name of the man who was smitten, Ashehuke es Hamidyonis, who had the affair with the Midianite princess, was Zimri ben Salu. Now, Zimri ben Salu was a well-known character. The Gemara in Sanhedrin on Pei Beis Amud Beis says, Chamisha Shemos yesh lo. He had 5 names: Zimri, Ben Salu, Shaul, Ben Haknanis, and the Nasi Shlumiel ben Suri Shaddai. Now, the Marsha in Masechta Sanhedrin, Zechatzav Kosh Brachas Chutz Yogim Aleinu, points out that since Zimri ben Salu was Shaul ben Haknanis, that means that he was at least 250 years old. It's a very simple thing. Shaul ben Haknanis were from those people, were from the 70 Nefashis that entered into Mitzrayim. Since he's around now, that means he lived through the entire era of Egypt, which is 210 years, and this incident with Pinchas happened at the end of the 40 years. So he was at least 250, and probably since he was traveling, we know Yocheved was Noiled Ben Achaimis, but probably since he was traveling, he was older than 250. So when he was killed by Pinchas, he was 250 plus years old. So the first thing we learn from this is the aside of Al Tamein Ba'atzmecha Ad Yom Ha'ischa. Don't trust yourself until the day that you die. A person shouldn't say, I'm coasting, I have enough momentum. No. You see that here he was a Nazi, Shlomiel ben Tzuri Shaddai, and he went sour because he caused the death of the 24,000 people of Shimon, and if it wouldn't be for Pinchas killing him, it could have destroyed all of Klal Yisrael, because it says V'lo chilisi es b'nei Yisrael because of what Pinchas did. So this is an incredible. At the end of his life, he had such a downfall, such a yerida. So we have to know Al Tamein Ba'atzmecha. We can never trust ourselves. We always have to be on guard, always. We also see that just because a person is a very old man, it doesn't mean that we should listen to him. Klal Yisrael, we understand now why more that no one stepped up except Pinchas, because this was very hard to, step up against a man that's 250 years old with such experience. But I want to point out something which I think is even more remarkable, because now we see that Zimri ben Salu is Shaul ben Haknanis. Who was Shaul ben Haknanis? So Rashi tells us in Bereshis that after Dinah was violated by Shechem, she had a hard time getting married. And although there are opinions that Eiv married Dinah, but we don't even know if Eiv was at that time. It's all machlokes above Basra when Eiv was, or even if Eiv might be just a mashal. Right? There's a whole question about it. So Rashi tells us that Shimon married Dinah, and they had a child Shaul, and she was called, Shaul was called Shaul ben Aknanis because it was with a mother who was Nivala from a Knanis. So we find here a remarkable thing. Dinah had 2 children. When she was violated by Shechem, it resulted in the birth of Osnas. That's why she was called Osnas, because she was a child of Osan, of a violation. And this was important, even though it's an embarrassing name, it was important to clear Dinah that it wasn't consensual. Right? It's also the same letters as Onos. And she had another child from Shimon, was Shaul, who ended up being Zimri ben Salu. So it's really interesting that her child from the Orel, from the monster Shechem, turned out to be Osnas, who gave her tremendous nachas, gave her an Edom son-in-law, Yosef HaTzadik, and gave her grandchildren, Ephraim and Menashe, who Keruven and Shimon Yuli, who are equal to the greatest Shvatim, Reuven and Shimon. That's why we give our children a bracha, Yisimcha L'Kim K'Ephraim U'Menashe, because normally it's Niskatna Hadoiris, and the generations get smaller, but Ephraim and Menashe defied that. They were Keruven and Shimon, they were like a previous generation. And she married a tzaddik, Shimon, one of the Shiftei Kah, and she had Zimri ben Salu, who would bring death to 24,000 in Klal Yisrael. So therefore we see that you could never know how a child will turn out. You never know that. And it's interesting because it says that the Shvatim, they were thinking about having Osnas killed because she was from the monster Shechem. And Yaakov said no and sent her down away to Mitzrayim with a kameya on her, Ani Osnas bas Dina bas Yaakov. And remember when it says Bonois Tzada alei Shur, that when the daughters of Egypt were climbing the walls to look at Yosef, and they cast flowers and jewelry at him, so Osnas cast her kameya. And when Yosef picked up the unusual projectile, Yosef was looking for a shidduch, and it said, Ani Osnas bas Dina bas Yaakov, he said, get her! And he married her. So we never know how a child is going to turn out. Chanoich mishpachas hachanoichi. So here we know Rashi's famous observation, why is there always a hey at the beginning of the name and a yud at the end of the name, right? Hachanoichi, right? Hashfufami, right? Hafuni. So Rashi says that the Goyim said about the Jews at the end of their time in the Midbar, that's because this is at the end of the 40 years, they said, what, the Jews pride themselves as being the Jewish people? They're all of Egyptian descent. I mean, the Egyptians had control over their bodies. You don't think that they controlled their women and took Jewish women for themselves? The Jewish people is adulterated throughout with the Egyptian blood. So Hashem attached his name, the name of Ka, Shem Ka, Eidos Yisrael. So he took the Yud and the Hey and attached it to the names Hachanoichi, Hafuni, Hashfufami, to say that all of Klal Yisrael was pure and not mixed with the Egyptians. They didn't sleep with the Egyptians, even though the Egyptians had control over their bodies, but they protected themselves from sleeping with the Egyptians. So it's very interesting Al-Shech HaKadosh over here. The Al-Shech HaKadosh asks, how come Hashem had to testify only at the end of the 40 years, and not in the beginning when we came out of Mitzrayim? So he brings down a Yalkut. It's such an interesting Yalkut. The Yalkut says that when we came out of Mitzrayim, the Goyim said, Jews? They're not Jews, they're Egyptians. In 210 years, it says that we were enslaved for 117 years, over a century. You don't think the Egyptians taskmasters took the Jewish women? Remember, uh, Jewish women were beautiful in the eyes of the Egyptians. It says Sarah, when she went down to Egypt, Paro abducted her. She stuck out like a sore thumb. Remember, Avram Avinu put her in a box to hide her. So how can it be that the Egyptians didn't take the Jewish women and do with them with what they pleased? It must be that the Jews are intermingled with Egyptian blood. So it says, Amar Rabbi Ishia, Hashem said to the Sar HaHeroyim, Hashem said to the angel of conception, make it that the children should look like their fathers. And that's what happened. The Jewish children looked like their Jewish fathers, so that no one should think they came from Egyptian fathers. It was a great miracle. And therefore, says the Livya Schein, to answer the Alshich HaKadish's kasha, it was only after 40 years when the fathers died, because that generation died in the Midbar because of the Chet of the Meraglim, and the fathers weren't around anymore, so you couldn't see the similarity between father and son, that now the Rebbeinu Shalom had to make an edus by attaching his name to them. Now this is reminiscent of another time that Hashem did this. Remember when Avram Avinu had Yitzchak, Sarah gave birth to Yitzchak, so the late Tzanei Hadar said, May Avimelech nisabra Sarah. They said, what, Sarah didn't have children from him all these years? You think now? It must have been that when Avimelech abducted Sarah, she became pregnant from Avimelech. And May Avimelech nisabra Sarah. So what did Hashem do? Tsar cluster shel Yitzchak Avram. He changed the facial features of Yitzchak to be like Avram. So everybody know, when it says in Parashas Toldos, that Avram holid es Yitzchak. Now here it's interesting. We know that it's preposterous to think that Me'avi Melech Nisabra Sarah. First of all, Yitzchak was born a full year after she was with Avimelech. So, I mean, nobody holds a baby for 12 months. Secondly, everybody knew that Avimelech, because he abducted Sarah, nobody was even able to go to the bathroom. There was a makkah, a plague. They couldn't go to the bathroom. They couldn't urinate. All their orifices were sealed. So the idea to think that Sarah was impregnated by Avimelech is preposterous. But even so, Hashem made a stupendous miracle, changing the facial features of Yitzchak to look like Avram. And this is again an example of how we have to be concerned about a shem tov, about our reputations. Hashem would make such a miracle in the Midbar that all the children looked like their fathers in order that nobody should say that we're from Egyptians. Now the fact of the matter is it was well known that in Egypt, vayakutzu mipnei bnei Yisrael, they were disgusted with us. That's what Hashem did in order that they shouldn't want us. You know, Hashem does these things. For example, Rav Miller says that the nature of suicide bombers protects Klal Yisrael from too much assimilation with the Arab women. Many of the Arab women are pretty and they are similar, they're cousins of ours. But nobody wants to be with them because they're so disgusted with them because of the suicide bombing. So Hashem does this vayakutsu. So the Egyptians also vayakutsu mipnei bnei Yisrael. Uvayom HaShabbos shnei kvasim. On Shabbos we bring 2 lambs for the Musaf. So there's a Daza Canaan Bali Taisus that says that Shabbos was Koratagler in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbos complained with Hashem that I have the smallest Musaf. The Yom Tovim, Reish Chodesh, they have a bigger carbon Musaf. Why does Shabbos only have 2 kvasim? So Hashem said to Shabbos, it's fitting for you. Because everything by you, Shabbos, is 2s. The song on Shabbos is a double. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. The punishment, Mechalaleha Mois Yumas. The bread is Lechem Mishnah. When it comes to calling Shabbos delight, it's a double. V'karasa l'Shabbos Einig L'Ktoish Hashem Mechubad. And we know the reward for Shabbos is double. Ashrei Kol Choycha L'Sashlumei Chayfel. Fortunate as those hope to be paid double. Whatever we spend on Shabbos, we get back double. That's why, by the way, the Misper Cotton of Shabbos itself teaches us this lesson. Look at the word Shabbos. The Shin in Misper Cotton is without the zeros. So Shin is 3, and Beis Saf is 6, right? Shin is 3, it's 300, it's 3. Beis is 2, and Saf is 400, that's 4. So Beis is 3, and Shin is 3, and Beis Saf is 6. So in the name itself, it indicates to the double payment of Shabbos. And therefore, this explains something we say in the Musaf liturgy, which when you read it, you don't know what it means. Look at the Musaf liturgy. You'll see that we say in Musaf, V'hakriv ba korban Musaf Shabbos karoi. We bring the korban Musaf Shabbos as is fitting. What does that mean, as is fitting? Now it makes sense, because it's fit to have 2, because everything of Shabbos is 2. Now, speaking about Einik Shabbos, I want to talk to you about something very important. You know, the reward for Einik Shabbos is a very exciting reward. Einik Shabbos is a delight, but it's a very exciting reward. It's a Gemara all the way at the end of Masechta Shabbos, on Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis. The Gemara says, in a pasuk in Tilim, in Kapitel Lamed Zayin in Tilim, it says, V'saneg el Hashem, delight with Hashem, v'yitein lecha mish'aloi slibech. And Hashem will grant you the desires of your heart. That's an exciting pasuk from David HaMelech. V'saneg el Hashem, delight with Hashem, v'yitein lecha mish'aloi slibech. Now the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, this is an ambiguous pasuk, delight with Hashem. In what way should you delight with Hashem? Somebody could learn. It means to learn Torah. After all, that's Hashem's delight. Right? That's what Hashem is mishtasheh about. That's what Hashem delights in the Torah. So the Gemara says, I don't know exactly what this delight is that David HaMelech refers to. The Gemara continues, Kishu Oimer v'karasa l'Shabbos Einig, that you should call Shabbos a delight, it must be b'Shabbos ka'amar. And therefore the Gemara extrapolates from this pasuk that kol ha'me'aneges Shabbos noisin lo mish'alei slibay. Whoever delights the Shabbos will be granted the desires of their hearts. Now that's a stupendous reward. So we have to know what exactly does it mean to delight the Shabbos. Because if you notice in the words of David HaMelech, he says, V'hisaneg al Hashem, to delight Hashem. It doesn't mean delighting the stomach. It's delightful to have a delicious cholent and a gishmak chicken soup and a scrumptious kugel. But it's hard to say that that's V'hisaneg al Hashem or a soporific sleep. It's hard to say. So what exactly is this timing? So I want to share with you a Beis HaLevi. It's a very revealing Beis HaLevi. The Beis HaLevi says that although the pasuk says V'daber davar, and we learn out from there that Diburim asurim, but hirhurim mutarim. Words are asur, but you could think what you want on Shabbos. However, the Beis HaLevi says that if somebody wants to delight in the Shabbos, he or she will refrain from even thinking about things that are not Shabbos. And if you look in the Tur, I checked it up tonight, if you look in the Tur in Siman Shin Vav, the Tur says to try not to think about things that you're not supposed to do on Shabbos. Ve'ein lach oine gadol mizeh. That's the lashon of the Tur. Now the Beis Yosef, who of course is the Baal Shulchan Aruch, who wrote the Beis Yosef on the Tur, Rav Yosef Cairo, who learned with an angel, the Maggid Meisharim, who learned with an angel. Rav Yosef Cairo brings down from an Igeris Rabbeinu Yoina that although it says here Hurim Mutarim, but if these thoughts will be Gairim Tirdas Halev, will be Gairim to trouble one's heart, or Nidnu Daiga, or any worry, it's awesome. And he bases it on Rashi's Pshat in the Torah. It says, Sheishis Yomim Tavoid, Vasisa Kol Malachtecha. 6 days you should work and do all your work. So Rashi says, but what if you didn't finish all your work? So Rashi says, when Shabbos comes, it should be as if all your work is finished. You shouldn't think about your worries during Shabbos. So says the Beis Halevi, Zech Tzadik L'Bracha, Zchusa Yagan Aleinu, Mida Keneged Mida, if one controls their heart from thinking about their worries and their troubles and their business on Shabbos, Hashem will reward them the desires of their heart. And I think by extension we could say that this is the meaning of Shabbos Himalizah Kurafur Krav Alava. That Chas V'Shalom, somebody is sick and they make sure not to cry out, so they're controlling their mind. When it comes to Shabbos, then Urfur Krav Alava, their desire is to get better, they'll be rewarded that desire, because that's what we're saying, that's being Ma'anigas of Shabbos, to preserve the Einig of Shabbos. And it's interesting, the Beis Yosef writes that this is what we describe Shabbos in Tfilas Mincha, Menuchas Shalom V'Shalva V'Hashkeit V'Vetach, a rest of peace and serenity, solitude and security. And he says this is also what we say in benching. It's a remarkable Beis Yosef. This is what we say in benching. Shaloi say tzara v'yagan v'anacha. That on Shabbos we shouldn't have tzara, yagan v'anacha, right? B'yom menuchaseinu, on the day of our rest. So if we're ma'aniges Shabbos and we protect it, making it truly into a yom that's me'ein olam haba, because of course in olam haba there's no worries, then we're zoicha that Hashem, Mirza Hashem, should grant us mishalo yislibeinu. What a truly wonderful reward. In this week's parasha, we have the Korban Tamid, the perpetual offering that's offered in the morning and in the night, 365 days a year. We know this parasha because we learn it always on Rosh Chodesh, Savas B'nai Yisrael, Ma'amad Aleim, Eskarbani Lachmi, L'Yishai Reach Nichaychi, the whole parasha. The Oilus Ephraim, which is written by the Klei Yakar, everybody knows the Klei Yakar, the Oilus Ephraim makes a remarkable observation. He says that in the parasha of the Korban Tamid are all the letters of the Aleph Beis except Gimel and Tes. Isn't that remarkable? In the parish of the Tamid are all the letters of the Aleph Beis except Gimel and Tes. Why? Because the Tamid is the preeminent korban of the Mizbeach and represents the Mizbeach. And we know that the Gemara tells us that Misha Megaresh Ishtoi Rishon, if somebody sends away his first wife, right? Afilu Mizbeach Moirid Olav Demois. Even the altar cries tears. So the Mizbeach hates get. And that's why there's no Gimel and Tes in the Korban Tamid, which represents the Mizbeach. Rapam had said that even the Mizbeach that's accustomed to slaughter cries over the slaughter of a get. But I thought that there could be another pshat in this Eilus Ephraim, which fits in very good. Because if you look in Bereshis it says that Vayitzer Hashem Elokim Adam Offer Min Ha'adama. Hashem created the first man, Offer Min Ha'adama. So Rashi first says that Hashem took earth from all over the world, so that wherever man dies, the earth will have to take him back and accept it to be buried. That's one pshat. But then Rashi says another pshat, that min ha'adama, the ha'ayadiyah ha'adama, is from the place of the Mizbeach, because the Mizbeach is called Mizbach ha'adama. So when it says that Hashem created man, min ha'adama, it means from the place of the Mizbeach. And we know the first man was a man and a woman back to back, right? So therefore, since from the Mokum HaMizbeach, man and woman were created together, when there's a get, which is an amputation, the Mizbeach cries, because it's from its earth that man was created as one. Talking about the Talmud, I saw something very interesting. We know that the Masechta about the Talmud is called Masechtas Talmud. So there's an obvious question. Since there's 2 Tmid in a day, so why is it called Masechtas Talmud? It should be called Masechtas Tmidin. And it's a very simple question. So I found the Chidah in Midbar Kedemos asks the question, and he says that it's brought down La'asid Lavai, there won't be 2 a day. There'll only be 1 in the morning. And therefore it's called Talmud al Shem Ha'asid. Now this reminds me of a question that my new wonderful son-in-law, Maishi Schwartz, asked me. Wonderful Talmud Chacham. And he asked me a question. We know we have 6 Siddharim, and one of the Siddharim is Seder Moyed. So he asked me, it's such a good question. Never thought of it. Why is it called Moyed in the singular? We have, Baruch Hashem, many Moyadim, which we're learning, right? We're learning now in the Daf Yomi, like now we're learning Yuma about Yom Kippur, there's Psachim, we're going to learn about Sukkot, we're going to learn about Rosh Hashanah. Why is it Moyed? It should be Moyed. The other Siddharim, it's called Nezikin, Noshim, Tyrus. So what, Kachim? So why is this Moyed? It's a blitzcash, what we would call in yeshiva, a bomba. I remember he asked me this, I was buying 2 Shabbos ago, and I'm thinking about it the whole Shabbos. So first I told him that maybe the only regel that's really in the Seder of Moyed is Psach. Because Sukkot, Masechta Sukkah is not about the Yom Tov, it's about the mitzvah of Sukkah. And there is no Masechta Shavuos. But the Maisa is, the Rosh Hashanah is called the Moyed, right? And there is a Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Then I told him maybe it's Al Shem HaAsid, this answer of the Chidah. Because L'Asid Lavai will be Yom Shekulei Shabbos and Menucha. So it'll just be 1 long Shabbos. So maybe since L'Asid will only be 1 long Moyed, that's why it's called Moyed. It's a possibility, but the question is better than the answer. It's something to really think about. V'loisia adas Hashem ketzayin asher ein lehem raya. Adas Hashem shouldn't be leaderless. It's interesting. We know we have 365 lavin in the Maritatz. He's quoted all over the place. This Maritatz. He says it's Korov Ledover, that a shul that doesn't get itself a rav is being over this lav of Leisia Adas Hashem Ketzayin Asher Ein Lehem Raya. Unfortunately, there are too many people today that think that they don't need a rav. Their parents suffered so much from the rabbi. They're always complaining about the rabbi, walking out on the drasha, trying that there shouldn't be a drasha. Why does it have to be a drasha? And if there's a drasha, it should be after davening so people could leave. Right? And why should we have to pay for a Rav? It says the Maritatz, it's like a laugh. Now, before I conclude with the last word for the evening, again, I want to make a plea that if you might know someone, an enterprising young person in the Lakewood area that maybe is interested in representing me as an agent, because as I'm moving to Lakewood at the end of the summer with the help of Hashem, I want to know where to do some of my shiurim, in which shuls, maybe to do my chumash shir in a big shul, maybe a woman's shir, maybe a daf, maybe I'll speak in a few schools, but I need somebody to set it up, and I would pay for it, but somebody knows it, enterprising, one of my dedicated Talmidim who might be interested in doing something. And then there are other things. I want to translate some of my svarim in other languages, my articles to get in different places in the world. There's many things to do. Maybe help me get some dedications for my new Beis Medrash in Lakewood. So if anybody thinks that they might be fit for the job, 718-916-3100. Also, we need a sponsor for next week or two, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. If somebody wants to send money, they could Zelle it or PayPal it at that email, rmmwsi@aol.com. If you think you might be able to help me with a dedication, please call me or text me at the above number. That number, by the way, is also the meeting ID number if you want to join my nightly Daf Yomi, Motzei Shabbos 10:20 Eastern Time for 2 blot, and the rest of the week 8:10. Go to zoom.com and then put in meeting ID 718-916-3100. We conclude with, it says, Tachas asher kinei le'elokov, Pinchas acted zealously le'elokov, with his God. That's a little strange, his God. Well, Kenu, it's our God. What's his God? So I saw, and it was a new thing to me, that Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Rav Shlomo Ganzfried, in his Sefer Apirion and Chumash, cites my Elta Zayda, the Imrei Eish, as his Rebbe. He says, Kosav Moiri V'Rabbi, the Imrei Eish, Meir Ash from Eisenstadt, B'Shem Oyel David, I'm not sure, but I think the Oyel David is Reb David Deutsch, that why is the Aseres HaDibris B'Loshen Yochid? What do you mean? It's talking to Klal Yisrael. Why isn't it B'Loshen Rabbin? So my Zayda says that it's because each person should feel as if the Torah was given just to him. And therefore he shouldn't be influenced if many other people aren't doing something. He should feel as if the Torah is given just to him. And therefore, that's why it says, but Pinchas Tachas asher kinei le'elokov, says the Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. But he wasn't influenced by the fact that everybody was standing around and nobody was doing anything. Too many times people are part of the silent majority. Well, nobody else is doing anything. Person has to feel that the Torah was given solely to him. And what should be his or her responsibility, and not influenced by the masses. As always, I want to thank all of you for coming to this shir. And remember, if you have a hard time watching the shir 1 week when it is streamed live, you could still watch it. It's put later on the Chumash section, and you could still access it. And you could also access my shiurim on the Parsha from other years. And on Kol HaLashon, I have many years of Chumash shiurim and lady shiurim. And also, if you want to share about the tragedy in Florida, as we think about all those that are suffering and their families, Hashem should give strength and Yeshuas. There is a shir in the section of how to react to tragedies about what happened in Surfside, which I gave in Fallsview Estates this Sunday, and you're welcome to look at it as well. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful Shabbos.